Hi, and welcome to Hoffman's Hot Seat. I'm Tom Hoffman with One-to-One Media, coming to you from the Dreamforce Conference here in San Francisco. And I'm joined this evening by Randy Rodriguez, Managing Director at Bluewolf. And tonight, Randy and I will be talking about some of the trends that are occurring in the financial services industry and how that's being impacted from a customer-centric standpoint. And Randy, thanks so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
So, Randy, what kind of trends are you seeing with respect to the financial services industry that you're so enmeshed in?
Well, I think first let's level set it, right? I think over the last 3 or 4 years, undoubtedly, we've seen the most turmoil in the financial markets since the Great Depression. Fortunately, we're seeing some recovery from that now. You're seeing that impacted in the markets and more positively reflected, but it's been a transformative period in general. And I think in that regard, you see a couple things happening. Number one, consumers. From a consumer perspective, how they view banks and institutions has changed. Trust becomes more important than ever. Transparency becomes more important than ever. Self-service and access to information becomes more important than ever. On the other side, from a banking and institution standpoint, understanding how to grow their organizations, understanding how to be responsive to those changes, also be risk averse, and be able to be both security minded and flexible in how they change and meet those needs has really forced banking institutions to do something that they're not traditionally known for. Become agile in their approach, become nimble in how they service customers. That's driving some organizations quickly to decide how they want to change and how they want to serve customers.
Okay, thanks. So, to play off what you just laid out for us, can you talk a little bit about how banks are applying the use of agile technologies to try to forge greater trustability with customers?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And as a global agile consulting organization, we really want to show institutions, banking and insurance institutions, how they can transform themselves and the kind of best practices to apply there. Again, the markets have simply driven a pace of change where if you're a regional bank, you either need to look to consolidate with a larger bank, you need to be a leader in the pack. And to make that happen, you've got to be able to change and transform rapidly. So an agile approach really gives organizations the flexibility in doing that because it becomes much more collaborative in approach, much more transparent in the stakeholders that are involved, security conscious but different in its application. So we're working increasingly with banks who want to understand how to take a more agile mindset and become an agile enterprise to really do a couple things. Number one, understand how to take every individual customer they work with, whether it's commercial, whether it's a consumer, and capitalize on the value they have in that relationship. And that means understanding how to manage them across all their lines of business, not just an individual line of business. So a home equity borrower can't just be a home equity borrower. He's got to understand how he can be a depository customer and be a potentially retirement or wealth management customer as well. All of those things become more important. Understanding how to create the right collaborative platforms to make that happen and really maximize the householding value of a customer. That's what banks want to get to. That's the secret sauce for them.
That's a great point, because we often find that part of the frustration that customers feel is when they're recognized or identified as separate customers to different divisions within a bank, depending on how many different lines of business they work with within the banking industry.
Absolutely. We're here at Salesforce's Dreamforce convention, so they are obviously a leading collaborative cloud-based solution in the market. Our experience is that we're working increasingly with large regional banks who want to understand how they can use a cloud solution like Salesforce across their entire enterprise and really begin to use that as the platform to capitalize on that behavior, capitalize on that maximization of value between all of their lines of business. And we've worked with some big institutions recently and deployed across every customer-facing individual in the bank a Salesforce-based solution to create a real ease of referral and ease of client management across all those lines.
Randy, you talked before about this importance of recognizing the customer's full scope of their relationship with the bank. And can you speak a little bit to the role that Bluewolf plays in helping banks to recognize not only the full scope of customer interactions, but also to make sure that there's alignment, say, between marketing and sales and other parts of the organization, so that there's effective communication around the board with customers?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just characterize it as banks increasingly understanding that their individual product lines can't be islands unto themselves, and that there's a common principle that applies to their sales effectiveness and their sales methodologies, that there's a interrelationship between their marketing, their demand generation, their effectiveness, and their sales behaviors and their end consumer, and understanding really how to create efficiencies that come in their operating expenses through commonization of principles and best practices across those lines. That's the kind of agility that we're looking for. That's the kind of agility that needs to be reflected in a collaborative platform or collaboration tool. It's where we think solutions like Salesforce.com add maximum value to banks. The real concern on the banking side has been sometimes around the issue of security and security in a cloud-based model. But we're seeing those walls broke down on an increasing basis as it becomes more and more readily accepted as part of an IT's planning landscape. So I think the payoff there, again, is customer knowledge, a view of the householding value of a consumer, efficiencies in operations across their line of business, and a better window into how all of that translates into value for the bank. That's really nirvana and where we're trying to drive organizations in the banking world.
And while we're on that stream of thought about analytics, can you point to any examples of banking customers that Bluewolf has worked with that have made effective use of customer analytics to help drive business outcomes?
Well, I mean, I think most recently, Huntington Bank is where we point. They've done an amazing job in driving transformation strategy in a very quick and a very decisive kind of way to really turn their operations from a bank that was really in a troubled state during this tough climate to one that's now being viewed as one of the strong regional banks based on an entire different approach to business, a different methodology, and the implementation of Salesforce as a collaboration tool across all those lines of business.
Okay, great. Well, Randy, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you.